Hello and welcome to episode 89 of the So Bet Punks podcast, the podcast about meaning, transcendence, awe and spirituality with a diddy little s. My name is Siobhan.
And I'm Dave. And you join us on an auspicious occasion.
As always.
Because we've just returned from travels.
Yep, yep.
We went to see the black metal... I don't know why I said metal.
I do. You say everything weird.
Metal. We went to the black metal friends in Norway.
Yeah, went to Oslo.
The hardcore friends in Sweden. In fact, we saw neither of either.
Neither of either. Well, we followed a few little grungy Oslo folks when looking for the black metal shop. But that is it. I really didn't see anyone else.
We literally followed a child who had sort of an Iron Maiden patch on his or her jacket.
Yeah. They must be going to the black metal shop.
They weren't there when we arrived, though. We lost them. We didn't even follow them well.
Pretty useless at following black metal children, it turns out, which is, good for them.
Yes. But we only flew home yesterday, so we are maybe not well prepared. I don't know. This will play itself out as the time moves on.
As it always does.
But
does. We have been on a lovely week away, so technically we're refreshed. I would say less than refreshed. I don't think we've walked that much ever. My legs are trash, but, it's all good. It's all good.
Siobhan lost her wallet.
Yeah.
In a public toilet in Sweden.
Well, maybe a public toilet on what turns out to be biggest...
One of the poo-eyest public toilets. No! One should never put one's wallet down on the floor of a public toilet.
Imagine you'd gone to Hyde Park on, what's a big public holiday, on like a bank holiday in the UK, a summer bank holiday. Maybe the Queen's coronation or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Queen's long dead.
Because it
was a huge public holiday.
Well, it was Midsommer.
It was Midsommer.
So I think most people have heard of Midsommer because of the movie. That's the only reason I'd ever heard of it.
Yeah.
Unless you're a Swede or probably a Scandinavian generally, who will probably be thinking, well, of course everyone knows Midsommer.
Yeah.
It's not comparable to Jack in the Green. Which is our May Day festival that we have.
It's more comparable to the Notting Hill Festival, I would say.
Yeah, but except it's even bigger than that because it's a public holiday.
Yes, that's true.
And like all the shops, we didn't have a clue that we were going. I'm sure a lot of people go out of their way to book 3 days in Stockholm.
Yeah.
Over the Midsummer Festival. We only worked out that it was Midsummer because all of the record shops were shut.
Yeah, we were like, right, let's just check if this is going to be open. And then good old Google says, Midsummer's Eve might affect these opening hours. And I was like, what the fuck? I swear I looked up whether we were going to be there over Midsummer. That would be joyous if we were. Turns out it's not really joyous to be in Stockholm on Midsummer, it turns out.
Pretty shit.
Yeah, and the reason I likened it to Notting Hill is I used to work in Notting Hill, and when Notting Hill Festival came round, everyone who lived there fucking left. They were like, no way, I don't want people pissing on my doorstep, and I don't want to be able to see it. So when you go to Notting Hill Festival, every single person there is not from there. Possibly not even from London. Or definitely not from that local area. And a similar kind of thing happens in Stockholm. But for nicer reasons in a lot of ways. There's not really a whole lot going on in Stockholm, but part of Midsummer is to go out, have barbecues and eat outdoors, and then it's all folksy and it's always in the parks, but not really in Stockholm proper. People who live there go to the archipelago islands nearby, which are just tiny little villagey islands that they can get to by boat, and so they all just piss off out there and camp to be out in nature proper. So not only are the shops
Siobhan knows
open,
all of this now.
Yeah.
Didn't know this when we were
Didn't know this in the booking or when we were there.
To make the decision that maybe we should not have been slap bang in the seas, aren't they?
But when we looked up what to do, they were like, oh my God, our Time Out book or whatever, the little travel book that we had.
Time Out? God, no, not at all.
What
that's
is it?
Really outdated. I don't know if Time Out make travel books anymore.
I
think it's a Lonely Planet.
Oh, a Lonely Planet one. Anywho, in there it was like, you must, oh my goodness, you're in Stockholm and you're lucky enough to be there over Midsummer, you've got to go to their open air park. It's, open air museum park. It's really good. They do a big festival there. And we were like, yeah, let's go. Got there, and you quite rightly, I knew that you were right, but I hoped that it might be better than it looked. When we got there, it just looked like people queuing up for like Winter Wonderland at Hyde Park, like just really bad.
It was like it would have been like going to London and saying, let's go to Leicester Square and just hang out.
Yeah. Get a real experience.
On a really busy day, like Saturday, even a Saturday afternoon. But I mean, particularly if it was like Easter Sunday or so, I don't know. People don't really go out there, and I don't know what to compare it to, but
like Lord Mayor's procession or
maybe
something.
That, yeah.
I don't know, but it was
just let's find the place where everybody goes, and let's go there.
But also, so I think
which is more up your street than mine. In fairness,
I was very up for doing it if what was behind, because you couldn't see what you were walking into. It's like a big hill park thing, and honestly at the gates you just don't know what you're walking into at all. So a lot of me was like, look, everything that I've just googled in the last minute says we should come here
because we've just found out,
and there's all these folksy things happening. Hopefully it'll be a bit of performative, but hopefully there'll be some element of it that's quite good or part of the thing to do, and nothing else is open, so we might as well go. But when we got in there, there was just nothing going on. One bit of maypole dancing we managed to see, which was bad.
It should also be said that the open air park that is the must see is just a fucking zoo, like a really sad, ugly zoo with just fat tourists walking around looking at these poor, sad looking animals.
An Arctic fox is the only thing we saw, and an Arctic fox, clue is in the title, probably not meant to be slumming it in a cage in very hot Stockholm.
And then there was a maypole, which is kind of the big thing. Like you all go around the maypole, but you couldn't. It was like walking into an Iron Maiden concert, but with really boring doll people. Yeah, and then some of them walking around in a circle singing really weird, like children's songs. Yeah, which I mean, I'm sure is part of the nice bit. I will say you missed out on quite an important bit. We did initially just go, because Stockholm is all islands, just in case nobody knows. And so we'd gone on to the little island that has all of this stuff on it. And we went for a walk around just the outside, like ignoring the park entirely, just went for a walk around the island. And you could hear in the distance this like weird folk singing, which must have been coming from inside this place. And at that second, for that period of time when we were around nobody and you could just hear in the distance some folk singing, I was like, oh wow, this is going to be really wicked.
And we saw a little deer.
We saw a deer, and I met the greatest tree I've ever met.
It was a wonderful tree that you met.
There was a tree that was completely empty inside. I don't know what had happened or how it had happened, or whether this happens with trees. But I got in it. I could stand in the tree. I can't really explain it.
You were like a little fairy.
Yeah, and you could see up the tree.
Yeah.
So you could get inside the trunk and you could look up and see the top of the trunk.
Yeah.
And sort of it opened out into a little, you could see the sky.
You were. It
was magical.
Like a little forest nymph you were.
And I was listening to my folk song, Coming on the Wind, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest day of my life.
And then about 2 hours later, I turned to you and you looked at me deadpan and said, this is the worst day of my life.
I didn't even deliberately set you up for that.
This has been the worst day of my life. And honestly, that just kept going around in my head and I was just crying with laughter. It was too funny. It turned out to then...
the worst day of Dave's life.
It then later turned out to be quite a stressful day because I think that's the day I lost my purse.
It was overall, it was the worst day of... both of our lives.
It was probably one of the worst days of travel. Just getting there, realising, shit, there's nothing open. Shit, we've probably done the stupid. Went to a few museums, which was fun. Then went to this stupid thing. Saw no culture whatsoever. In fact, a vapid expanse of nothing. Then used this public toilet next to this restaurant that was like pumping out dance music, and people were like in their tiny little dresses and posing for cameras, and I was like, geez, what have we done? This is not... Midsommer is just the excuse that becomes everyone's got the day off, so everyone's getting fucking rat-ass tonight, which is fine, and absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it was... Given that I think I quite like the folksy thing, just to have had an absolute none of it kind of sucked, but it is what it is. And then turns out we were starving. We'd walked off that island onto the old island looking for food, been walking around for ages, and we're like, fuck it, we'll just go in here. And then lo and behold, didn't have my wallet, probably left it in that toilet, ran all the way back to that toilet, sweaty as hell, and it was not in there.
But here's what I would say.
But here we are.
I don't know if this is anything to do with Buddhism.
Oh.
But losing one's wallet with all cards Your driving license, house keys, everything. Basically, in a foreign country.
Yeah, everything but my passport.
Yeah, that was just utter luck, and I don't think we would have been quite as calm had the passport gone.
No.
But maybe this is just maybe I'm just paying you a compliment more than saying anything. But I don't know whether it's the meditation that's helped with this or not. But you were alarmingly calm. I mean, we were stressed when we were running because we'd walked about as far as we could walk away. Before you noticed as well. So we probably had at least, I'm not even kidding, it was probably a 5 mile walk or something.
I was going to say 5 kilometres, 5 miles pushing it.
Oh, whatever.
It was a fair
It's not really important, is it? It was a long fucking walk.
Long old walk.
And I don't think either of us were anywhere near as stressed as we would have been had this happened to us a couple of years ago. I don't know why that is.
I think it's a matter of things. Maybe it is the meditation.
You were alarmingly calm once you realised that it was not there. Once we got back and we looked in the thing, you were just like, right, well, that's that then.
I think that's it. I think it was all anticipation. Honestly, I could feel, I thought, oh my God, panic attack coming. Not panic attack, but, that kind of like hot, sweaty, fighting off crying. I was like, because a bit of me was like, I wanted to cry. And I was like, what on...
All right, you're disproving what I just said.
No, but this is...
So the meditation's been shit.
No, but the process, like, I had this, like, urge to cry, and then it was, like, a word with myself, like, crying is going to... Like, it solves nothing, it's woe is me, and actually, I just got really practical, even though I was sweating and very bright red and, feeling panicky, and I felt sick. It was, get there... and see if it's where you think it is. Because luckily, in my brain, I think that's where it is. My last transaction was getting into this toilet because you had to pay. So I've not gotten my purse out since. And I couldn't think of anything else that I could have done with it. So I was fairly convinced it was there. But it was the distance that we were from there and all the people that could have found it. And all this stuff.
There was a comedy element to this as well, because this was 2 people rushing back through basically the entirety of Stockholm, whilst everyone else was having the biggest party Stockholm has on a yearly basis. Yeah. So we were just continuously walking past people all dressed up with all like crowns of leaves on their head. Everyone's pissed up. Yeah. You're walking past bar after bar after bar with people just having the best time.
And there's us.
Whilst... the Sobet punks
running desperately trying to remain equanimous through this sick feeling
to a really disgusting dirty shit covered toilet,
and I can't even describe the hell that was in this toilet as well, because everywhere was so there was one point where you said
what if it's in the bin, shall I go through the bin? And I looked in the bin and I was like, fuck that. No, you shouldn't go through that bin. I can see all of the things that have come out of people. There's not a single colour from anybody's body that is not represented in that bin.
Oh my God, it was so bad. I'm not going to lie. Oh, it was bad. But anyway, you're right. The second I knew it wasn't there, I just wanted to be done thinking about it. Because I think it was one of them things, like, when there was a possibility that I might get it back, if I didn't know where, I think if I had no idea where it could have been, I'd have gotten over it pretty quick. But because I was so convinced that it was going to be in there, that's why I was stressed, because I was like, it is, like, in my brain I was like, it is in there and I have to be there really quick.
Every second counts as well.
Exactly. Because it is in there now. It was just this like weird reality to me that I was like, it's definitely in there, so we have to run because it's definitely in there, and if it's not there when we get there, then that could be my fault, or that could be because we didn't get there quick enough, or anything stupid like that. But then, it wasn't in there. We asked pretty much because this is the other thing, it's a public toilet that's not really attached to anything, so you just went to every museum, and this island is full of museums, so we went to every museum, every kiosk, every cafe, every restaurant, just being like, has anyone handed in a wallet?
From those dirty public toilets over there.
I kept saying where I'd left it, and eventually realised no one cares. In fact, people are looking at me real fucking weird. I bet the less I say about where I think I left it, the better. And everyone was really, apart from the very first person we asked, everyone was incredibly trying to be helpful. Someone got on their phone. I don't know who on earth they could have been ringing. And maybe they've got to know the local pickpockets. Maybe it was like Oliver.
Yeah, maybe.
Who knows?
I don't think there are any. I'm not sure. Maybe there are.
But this is the thing. I think the sad thing is, not sad thing, but the thing that I think made me think, oh gosh, was that it was most certainly handed in. Like, no one had tried to spend any money. I checked on both of my accounts that nothing had left. And it wasn't where I definitely think it was left. So someone probably did hand it in. And at that point, you're like, someone's tried to do the right thing. It's somewhere. Who knows where, but we're leaving in 2 days. So then it was very immediately, okay, well, there's nothing I can do. And pure acceptance, get on the practicalities of cancelling the cards and just, what can you do?
No, 100%.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. But I mean, I suppose, if nothing else, it could have ruined the holiday. And it didn't. I mean, really. But I mean, it ruined that afternoon, but that day couldn't have really got much worse.
It was pretty bad. We were literally starving at this point. I think that was the other thing.
We'd gone for dinner. That's when we realised that, and we only had one card really that we could use abroad. That we would
so
there was that aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
So it was a
slight panic.
It would have been a nightmare, except it wasn't. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say.
It all worked out fine.
And then we got home, two people that don't watch TV. But of course, in a hotel room have TV, and discovered that Sweden shows Murder, She Wrote, so everything was fine. And watched a lovely episode of Murder, She Wrote, and then they showed the film Midsommer. So we sort of had a salad in bed, like two very cool people.
Yeah,
got an early night,
listening to people clubbing through Midsommer.
So that was fine.
It was fine. It was all fine in the end. Equanimous. That's what we were.
After
a small period of stress.
I think we were to a point.
Yeah. I think it was a lesson in acceptance. Yeah. Fuck it. We're better people now. We're growing. Well, there was a time where that might have been way worse. Again, had it been the passport, I think equanimity might have gone pissing out the window. Imagine it was a bank holiday. Are the embassies even open? I don't even want to go there.
Know. But when you tried to ring the police to report it stolen, the police weren't open. So I'm assuming that the embassies might have had the day off too. Anyhow, assuming that is not it, we like to start this podcast by telling you one thing that we've done over the last couple of weeks, which has provided us with a sense of transcendence, meaning, or spirituality with a small s.
Yeah.
Siobhan, what have you done?
Well, it is to do with the travels, I'm not going to lie. And it's a really basic one, but the feeling never escapes me, and so I think it's worth noting. That the feeling of awe when you realise just how fucking small you are is happening when you look up at the sky or when you look out at the sea. And we just had an extraordinary amount of opportunities to do that. And flying. It's just flying, looking out the window, seeing just how fucking huge the sky is. Seeing as you go through the clouds and then you're above the clouds and you're like, there is a whole world below us and this is insane. And then when you come back through the clouds and you can see everything on the ground, but it's fucking miles away. It's just a bit insane. And getting to do that over places like Stockholm and, not Stockholm specifically, over Sweden and over Norway. Just seeing that lovely space. There's just so much fucking space.
I would say both cities are extraordinarily beautiful, but in very different ways. I mean, Stockholm was much more of an actual city. So I've never been to either. You had. But Stockholm is much more of an actual city.
Yeah.
But in that context of it being extraordinarily grand.
Yeah.
The architecture is unbelievable. But Oslo's fairly small, but it's I don't know. There's something about, Oslo.
It's just beautiful.
We said this while we were away. I don't know what all those black metalers had to complain about. I've been watching documentaries and reading books about
7-Eleven
black metal since I was 14 or something. And you would just think, and I suppose I kind of get it, because what most of them say is more or less that they're against the sort of normos, I suppose. Like anybody else, it's that sort of rebellion thing. But ultimately, they kind of describe Norway as just being this awful culture. And then you get there and you're just like, there's never been a nicer place to exist.
Yeah.
It's amazing. How did black metal come out of this place?
is dumbfounded.
But yeah, it's a beautiful city.
It is beautiful. And very specifically, and maybe this is a tiny little thing to note, I just loved how, involved with getting in their own water they are as well. It sounds really silly, but it very much the water has taken me in this
We
respect.
do live by the sea as well.
Well, I think it's really different, and maybe it's always what you don't have that you kind of look at, but there are loads of islands, and it's really common that just people are just getting in and out of the water in the main city. And you can tell it's something the locals do, and it's not just touristy stuff. Like when you go to a beach, Hastings is very good at people getting in the sea. But obviously, when it's really busy, you can just tell that it's people, coming for the day as a special event. But there were so many opportunities at every point in the city. Every time there was a bit of water's edge, there's no sign saying don't get in or sign saying do get in. There's just a ladder, and it's assumed that people will be getting in. There's also saunas and lots of things available on these little floating islands, so you can get in the water and then get out and get in the sauna. And it's just a really accepted part of the culture to be in that really cold, fresh water. Which I think, especially like you, for example, you're doing all your cold water showers and all that sort of stuff. There's just something in that kind of attitude to wellness and freshness and being in the water that I just really liked. Also, that water was so dark.
Yeah.
It was just fascinating how dark it was. I don't know if that's indicative of how deep it is. I think it might be. Because the sky was bright blue, so it definitely wasn't reflecting off of there. So yeah, the water in Oslo and a bit about the sky.
I suppose the atmosphere generally was, for example, it was hot while we were there. The sun was out. It rained one day, but it was basically hot and the sun was out for the entirety that we were there. And we walked about in it all day, every day, and didn't get burnt.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. I'm sure there's science behind that. Maybe the sun's further away, I think
it might be.
I don't know what.
Who knows?
And of course, it's light all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's that time of year. So.
And we were there for the longest day of the year, Midsommer.
Yeah.
So I think there was like 3 hours of darkness that night.
But it just creates a completely different atmosphere, and it's really interesting. It's this thing that I'm quite obsessed about, of the funny little things that either you do or you experience that actually create at the end point.
Yeah.
Your happiness or your contentment. And it's loads of stuff, we've talked loads about our diet. Like diet is the ultimate one, what you put into your body, you don't necessarily realise it, but ultimately at the end point of that, you create a better life, your mental state is better. And I think what you're talking about there of people getting in the water or just being around the water or living within that atmosphere where that's normal, even if you're not someone that gets in the water, creates this sense of well-being, which is very hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. I think overall, we're quite calm people, particularly now, and we do a lot to maintain our mental health and stay calm. But I think being in that atmosphere makes you even calmer. And you just think, well, imagine living there.
Yeah. There's lots of Scandi words for things like this. So
Hygge.
That's it. That's the one I'm trying to think of.
That's the Danish one, right?
Is it Danish?
I think it's Danish.
But I think I think it's translatable to other. If it's not that same word, there's another word that is.
You're right.
Exactly
There's definitely a Swedish one.
There's definitely Hygge.
Yeah.
Fika is their kind of like chill out, have lunch all fucking time, which I like.
But again, if that's normalised, then what does that do to your life? If you compare it to British culture, and British culture is not particularly bad, I don't think. I'm not really saying that, but there's like an importance on relaxation. There's an importance on fun. Yeah, there's an importance on the outdoors, and we have that to some extent in our country, probably compared to some. But the lack of that, or pushing more importance on, for example, working hard, or putting more importance,
and then you relax by getting pissed in the pub.
Like what does pub culture compared to getting in the water culture to a nation? And it isn't, it's everybody's minds, isn't it? It's everybody's brains.
And also, given that they were both main cities, and it was obviously a culture that everyone joins in on, it wasn't ever really that busy, which doesn't mean that it's not used. I think it means it is spread out. Whereas in our culture, we wait for the perfect moments to do things. So people are only going to go out in the sea when it's fucking boiling and it's a really hot day and they've got the whole day to do it. And so, but actually in Hastings we have a lot of people that will sea swim every day. Like it is slightly different, and I do think Hastings is quite specific for that. And some of the, I know people that do it in Brighton and Hove, but I think that's still relatively in the minority.
I think that's true. But then
the fact that it exists is part of that's where I see the relatableness.
We don't
culture.
know. You go to Oslo and you just think, God, isn't it amazing? Everybody's always in the water. But of course, it's still a minority.
And it's what you're taking in as opposed, it's what you concentrate on.
Having walked around during Midsommer and looked at what they were doing as far as like partying is concerned, there was no additional culture to what we have in this country or what anybody has in any other country. Like, it was just as mindless and just as that's why that's where black metal comes from, I suppose.
Yeah, or the extreme metal, all the various. But yeah, that's me. Long winding answer. David, anything to add for yourself in the last 2 weeks? Meaning, transcendence, or spirituality with Lilith? Go.
Well, of course, all we've really
aside
done
from the tree.
is the tree. I mean, I hadn't even thought of the tree, but ultimately, it probably is that. All we've done really is travel to. I was grasping at straws a little bit, but there is one, and I think it might even have a little bit of a knock on to what we're going to be talking about later, maybe. And that is that I watched the film Mr. Smith Goes to Washington from 1939. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I think it's fairly well known, but it's probably not one that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. But almost everyone, I imagine, knows It's a Wonderful Life, which is a Christmas film. This is directed by the same person, Frank Capra, and stars the same person, James Stewart, and is very similar in a lot of ways, but completely different story, but similar in its sort of tone.
Right.
And I loved it, and I don't often watch old movies, but it's a great, it's just a lovely film, and I'm sure most people have probably seen It's a Wonderful Life, and they would probably say the same thing. It's just a lovely, lovely film to sit and watch. But one of the things that I took from it, and one of the things that I'm kind of want to talk about here, is the just sheer lack of postmodernism involved, which makes a lot of sense. And I think if you watch things from that period of time, they're very. I really can't find the exact word for what it is that I'm looking for, but it's that there is no irony, there's no sarcasm. Everything is exactly presented to you as it is. Now, of course, you could describe that as saying, well, it's quite simple. It's like, that sounds sort of like baby films. We like films that are, and we talk a lot about how nuance is important and empathy and things, and empathy comes from things not being so simplistic.
Yeah, it's imaginal. You have to put yourself in someone's. Yeah.
But there is something to be said for a complete lack of irony that I think we don't have any of in our culture now. And I think that I don't know where that comes from necessarily, but you would not make a film like It's a Wonderful Life or like this anymore. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's quite a good thing. But it just made me think a lot about maybe what we're missing from not being genuine all the time. Like I want to make a film, and I should say the film isn't exactly, the message of the film is one I should acknowledge is very like patriotic. It's set in America, and it's very patriotic. It's very simplistic. It's very moral.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of things that I would probably critique actually as a person, but
it's also like pre-Second World War, right? So it's very time and place.
The Second World War was kind of happening, or about to happen, I suppose. America weren't in it yet, but and there was something about how simple it was that I just thought, do you know what? So I don't wish that culture was like that. Yeah, at all.
We miss something.
But we miss something when we can't be like, here's just a genuine thing.
Yeah.
Because I think if you look at all art, music, film, everything, all writing pretty much, everything has that sort of postmodern, or for the most part, meta-modern feel to it.
But I say it's meta now, isn't it? The snake eating itself almost.
Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, that's just where culture's gone, and there's nothing you can do about that. But at some point, it would be nice if there was just a few things that were just like, here's a thing that I think is good. Like I'm gonna start a band, which is a band which makes music that I like, and I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities. I'm going to sing about things that I actually believe in. I'm going to dress the way I actually dress, and then that's what you get.
Do you know what? I could definitely see that as, just speaking from, the the perspective of what you're saying is, you know, we're postmodern, we're actually meta now, that probably could be the next thing. You know what I mean? What was going to break meta? What is going to break the thing that's happening right now?
Yeah.
Other than civilization collapsing?
Well,
what would the next creative people do?
Probably civilization collapsing is what's going to happen next. But
the alternative, you break something by going against it or presenting its opposite, and in this banal kind of fake, everyone's just looking at mirrors of, you know, pictures of themselves and nothing's really happening. Genuine creativity would not just be like the opposite, it would be like a protest to it, which but it's not even just a protest, it's what we all deep down need. Like, I think it would be if you could do it, it would be a bit of, not revolutionary, I sound very hopeful, but because it's something that people genuinely need as humankind, I think people would, it's the only way that could snap people out of it in a way.
But I suppose
how you would do that is fucking, I don't know.
Well, maybe the problem with that though is that it probably still exists, but it exists in the simplest version of culture. Probably, I don't know, I wouldn't have a clue about this.
Yeah.
But probably if you watch EastEnders, it's probably sort of this.
Yeah,
you know
maybe.
What I mean? Like there are simplistic stories being told.
Yeah.
That are completely on the money. I don't know, you know, but they're not necessarily genuine, and I think maybe that, and it's a hard, thing to put your finger on.
They're so swayed by what's in the zeitgeist of the time, and what's in the zeitgeist of the time is bullshit.
Well, they're also being made by really basic people. So I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that it would be nice if someone with a genuine, bona fide artistic vision said, I'm just going to be genuine.
Because I guess what we're getting, and what the opposite to that is Netflix tallying up what you're watching and then creating a program that mirrors what you're watching. Like, is the exact, you were like this, this, and this. Most people like this, this, and this. I'm going to make a program that encapsulates all that, rather than I've got an idea and my creativity leads me this way.
Yeah,
because I genuinely think this would be good.
Well, we also watched, so I think maybe this is a good example. We also watched a documentary about Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
And it was a documentary that was kind of interesting in its scope, because Paul Rubens, who was Pee Wee Herman, died just after they filmed all the interviews for it. He's someone who more or less stayed in character his entire life, didn't really show any of his actual real self, and for a long time was just Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
And his whole thing was that he was going to pretend to be Pee Wee Herman all the time.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of, although obviously that's changed over the course of time, but this is kind of the first time that he's ever told his life story.
Yeah.
And so the documentary, though, was made, it's a new documentary that's just come out, and it was made partly him telling his story of his life in real life, and then there would be a chunk of it that was that, and then there would be a long bit that was just a straight up documentary about the Pee Wee Herman show, like what had happened. So so as a result of that, there was this continuous going back from 2023 or whatever it was that they filmed it to the 80s or to the 90s. The bits of the documentary that were just literally telling, like the documentary bit of the documentary, that was literally just showing you stuff from the 90s with some voiceovers referring to it, was brilliant. It was perfect. The rest of it was just completely meta. It was not a film about Pee Wee Herman. It wasn't a film about Paul Rubens talking about Pee Wee Herman. It was a film about somebody making a film about someone who hadn't talked about their own life before. And there was such a clear difference between those two ways of making a film. And of course, some people might argue, well, that's a really good documentary then, isn't it? They've managed to tell the story of Pee Wee Herman's career.
Yeah.
And they've also managed to do this other thing, which is kind of about somebody opening up for the first time.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to me anyway, and I don't think this is an unreasonable thing to say, it just completely ruined the mystique. So the whole thing this guy spent his entire life creating, which is Pee Wee Herman, it sort of turned out that he's quite dull, I would argue, in real life, and not really, that didn't really come across as a particularly nice person, I didn't think, but that's arguable. So there was that aspect of it, but also the what you really wanted was just a fucking documentary about Pee Wee Herman's this incredible thing, this incredible character that someone has created that did all of this incredible stuff and was around at a time when like there was just so much creativity going on, and created this entire aesthetic that was really influential. And I mean, you know, you can just go on and on about how incredible this Pee Wee Herman thing was that just suddenly existed. And of course, Pee Wee Herman itself, the character is kind of has irony involved and is kind of sarcastic and all those things. But it's a genuine thing. It's like somebody saying, I am going to do this with my life. Yeah. And I think this is a genuinely lovely thing to do for kids. And then it became something that mostly stoners watched. Mm-hmm. But there was this real dichotomy between this genuine thing that happened, this cultural event that was going on through this period of time, and then this shit documentary being made about it that was all about the director making that. It was mostly about the guy trying to interview Paul Rubens and trying to get him to say things that he wanted to say, and Paul Rubens not wanting to say the things that he wanted him to say, but then actually did. And it was just like, this stuff is just fucking painful.
I think there's I don't know. I think some of that kind of works because I think from watching it, Paul Rubens desperately wanted to be known. So whilst he played this character his entire life in some kind of artistic, creative thing, what becomes clear is the entire time he's Pee Wee Herman, he's not Paul Rubens, and that's brilliant until he wants to be known. And I think that's the entire, and I think the documentary did a really good job of showing him to be that difficult, credit obsessed person. Yeah. So that's why he's done this documentary. And I think some elements of that kind of like hoo-ha between him and the documentary maker helps show him to be difficult. But I think what I hate and what I think is the meta thing is you can and I think actually Paul Rubens really plays with this really well in being difficult, is he's exposing he's exposing it, and then he's also playing into the role of the documentary person being huge, and that kind of idea of like, oh, it's meant to feel more personal that the documentary maker is them so involved in it.
But it's not though, is it?
No, it's not. So it's very fake and horrible.
It's like a fake. It's basically like saying I'm going to be really empathetic to this guy, but not really.
No, exactly.
There's actually no empathy involved.
And I think I think Paul Rubens is really good because in his difficultness, I think he shows that up a bit. I think him being difficult. I think the documentary maker is either in or not in on the joke, and I don't think he is in on it really, because then he's like, oh, Paul was really difficult at this point. Oh, this happened and this happened. It's just like, well, actually, I think if anything, he's trying to make sure that it's not about you and making it very like, you want me to say this and I'm just not going to do it.
Well, that makes it darker though, because ultimately he died and he knew he was dying when he was making this documentary. And definitely an aspect of those conversations between him and the director, in hindsight, were him more or less saying, I'm leaving you with this. Yeah. So I don't think he didn't necessarily know that he was going to die quite so soon, but I'm leaving you with this material and you're going to get to make whatever film you want to make. Yeah. And I think ultimately the bit that gets lost there is the fact that the director has clearly made the film that he did not want made. Yeah. And I suppose you could say, well, that's good journalism, but I would say, no, that's shit journalism, because it's made the film worse. Yeah. It was a 2-part film. Definitely should have just been a 1-part film. Yeah. Like there was no need for most of the shit that they put on there.
But I don't know. I was glad of the...
Anyway, sorry. But I know you enjoyed it more than I did, and that's fine. This isn't really supposed to be about Pee Wee Herman, but I suppose I just think we could do with more genuine bona fide things. And when you don't necessarily, so the places that you used to get that from have long since stopped being trusted. It's the whole institutions thing, isn't it? Like you at least accepted that the BBC was serious. Mm-hmm. You at least accepted that. Politicians were serious. And I don't think anybody thinks that about any of those institutions anymore. No. So you're left with this dearth of like, what? Right, so who do you believe in? Well, it's a handful of, people who are famous for being whatever, but those people are being forced into these little meta-modern squares in order to make their art. Like you said about, maybe that's the next thing that needs to be done. But in order for that to be the next thing that needs to be done, someone needs to actually be willing to put that out
Yeah.
Like, looking at, so for example, I work around books, and within the publishing industry, if you wrote a straight up book, a really brilliant straight up book that had none of the bullshit that the publishing industry expects of you, it just wouldn't get published. Doesn't matter how good it is. And so you can say, you can publish it yourself, but the problem is there's so much noise in the world that
no one's going to see
it. So, so if, I don't know, 1984 was written now, just no one would see it. It would probably be an ebook, which is just insane. Or, take anything, Crime and Punishment. I don't know, take whatever book you think is good. If it was written now and it didn't have some sort of twizzy bullshit, it just wouldn't get released. And there's a reason for that. It's because no one would buy it. So it's like this ever decreasing circle of, and I think it's true of music.
Yeah.
I think it's true of all art.
And it's a shame, because the worse it gets, the less people connect with it. It's like it's a downward spiral. Like, if you're putting out things that aren't genuine and people don't connect to, people
don't expect to connect to anything.
Yeah, they don't expect it, and they lose the ability and they lose the will, even though it is there, because we're humans and we need this kind of connection. But then we're faced with things that are faux connecting us, or faux giving us what we want. We can get things delivered to our house. Netflix is creating things that are in my interest. This is amazing. I can connect with people all over the world via Instagram and, have all this real stuff. And it's like, actually, that ends up taking the place of the thing that we really need, and just further, like,
and I think we all know it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem with the whole meta thing, is that we know it, and yet we've been sort of fooled into having this idea, this like concept of what to expect from the world, that we expect to be a step away from everything.
Yeah. And what we're left with is just this feeling of ugh. Which, again, go back to John Vervaeke, the meaning crisis that we're all experiencing. There is something in there. It's all tangled up in that sort of thing. Yeah. But it is why I think if anyone was ever able to just do something really genuine and out there, because they genuinely like what they're doing and they have a creative vision, and it could. But the problem is, you'd have to get that to connect with. You'd have to get it out there to a level that people would connect with it, and the method of doing that are just.
It's just wishing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like neither of us are going to do it. No one we know is going to do it. So I mean, it just is what it is, really.
It's idealism. It's at its best.
Yeah,
but who knows?
And I blame Satre.
Yeah, why not?
But
why?
Horrible little shit with a personality disorder.
Ah, yeah. All right, moving on to what is meant to be the main part of our episode. I don't know how long we've talked for already, but I believe there's some right speech in there somewhere. We're going to move on to another step of the Eightfold Path. We've done right view and right thought thus far, so we're going to move on to the third one today in the order that we're doing, and that's right speech. The quote I've got from a Christmas Humphreys book sums it up. Right speech needs little comment, which actually I think sums it up entirely.
So good luck with doing an hour's podcast.
I know. Its essence is control until our every word is courteous, considerate and true. All idle gossip and unprofitable talk must be stamped out. Silence should be so respected that the words which break it must leave the world the better for their birth. I think that's just such a nice summation of what right speech means, which we'll get to. We'll flesh it out a bit.
I imagine, I mean, anything else that we say is basically going to be another version of that. Brad Warner describes it as abstaining from lying, from divisive speech, from abusive speech, and from idle chatter. It's, again, very simple. It is such an obvious small thing, you could argue. But having said that, so he says speech is a big deal for Buddhists because it's a big deal for human beings in general. No other animal we know of talks at all, but we humans talk all the damn time. Buddhist philosophy is conveyed mainly through talking and through writing, which could be considered a sort of subspecies of talking. And I think that's kind of interesting because speech is something really simple. Yeah. Right? It's going to be hard to talk about to some extent. I don't actually think it is, but we'll see. But ultimately, it's a huge aspect of our experiences. Yeah. And the stuff that we've talked about over the course of the last 2 weeks, speech is kind of I mean, obviously, we've got 8 of these paths. So I shouldn't say this now, but it's kind of like ultimately the end of the first two, right? I mean, what you say is kind of what you are and who you are. Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh says a really nice thing that leads on from that, actually. Our thoughts are no longer our private possessions. We give earphones to others and allow them to hear the audio tape that is playing in our mind, which I think kind of sums up that, we can practice our thinking, we can practice our views, but the only way that we know what other people think and that they know what we think really is speech. Speech kind of flows into all the other parts so much and is such a big part of all of this but we need to spend some time thinking about it and like practicing it well, because I've always thought a bit the other way around. Like, you can speak well, but you can be thinking shit and still ultimately be a shit. But if you're actually watching what you it's vice versa. If you're watching what you say, you're giving yourself pause to think. Well, to think, basically. People say think before you speak, or don't say anything if you have nothing nice to say. There's a deep meaning in that. It's if you can practice speaking well, your thought and your view will be impacted.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's circular again, isn't it? That fits into the stuff that we've been talking about for the last 2 episodes, which is about that idea of it. So what you put in is what comes out, but also what comes out is what goes in to some extent. So, and of course, on a really practical social level, how you speak to people, what you say to people makes the decision in some sort of fairly existential way of what sort of people you're going to end up spending your time with. Yeah. Often you'll meet someone who you find repulsive and you think, oh, why are they being so horrible? Why are they being so nasty? I hate this person. Or, equally, I often bring Donald Trump up as the sort of ultimate version of that. It's kind of like this awful man. How is this awful man? And he's so happy with himself. But of course, even if he thinks he's happy with himself, or somebody who's horrible to you thinks that they're happy with themselves, they're not actually, because they're creating with their words and with their actions and with their attitude to other people, creating what they're going to get back from the world as well. So there's, again, you just end up in a sort of circular... Yeah,
it's like this perpetuating machine of misery.
Yeah,
One thing I noticed in all of the books that I've read and what you just explained in your description of it was it does sound quite negative. It's like, it's about not being this. It's about not being this. It's, don't be spiteful. Don't be untruthful. But Goenka in his book kind of tries to re-emphasize the positive part as well. So negative meaning, abstaining from doing things. But he says that also right speech is speaking the truth and steadfast in truthfulness, trustworthiness, dependable, straightforward with others. Speech is gentle, pleasing to the ear, heartwarming, courteous, agreeable, and enjoyable to many. His words are worth remembering, timely, well-reasoned, well-chosen, and constructive. Can you think of anything antithesis to that is Instagram, fucking what most people say all the time?
Our culture.
But I just love this kind of pause for thought, this kind of... If you're gonna and the Christmas Humphreys quote I really like silence is to be so respected. It's thinking about it the other way. Like, if you're gonna speak, treat silence so respectfully that if you're speaking, it's got to be worth you saying those words.
Yeah,
she says, literally bastardizing that sentence right now. But I think with regards to thinking before you speak, it's not just thinking before you speak so you don't speak something untruthful or spiteful. It's about actually like treating words as so powerful that only speaking them if they're worthwhile and true and constructive.
And we live in a culture of content, right? Which again, if you keep in mind that speech and writing are right, if you take writing as a type of speech,
which I think
we can and probably will,
and it comes up in books.
We live in a world where as much shit as you can put out into the world is seen as a positive thing ultimately. Not for everybody by any means, but every sort of version of social media, or almost everything that you could put out there into the ether of the internet, is ultimately just desperately trying to fill the silence with just anything, just so that, because filling it with anything is better than filling it with nothing.
And that's what, it isn't just social media. Like, we've been on a lot of public transport in the last week and just overhearing people's conversations, there's nothing worthwhile happening there. People are just filling the air. This is a big generation, I do appreciate that, but it's just really sad to see people just existing with each other and just this nothing that's happening sometimes. Like, I'd rather silence than hearing half of what.
Well, I mean, on a really practical level, the ultimate version of that to me is hearing a phone go off, someone answer the phone, and then have a conversation with whoever's on the other end. And often you can hear the other end because it's on loudspeaker, particularly on public transport. Basically just telling each other where they are, and that's sort of it. Yeah. Oh, where are you? Oh, I'm on a bus. Oh, where are you? Oh, I'm on a train. I'm in my car.
Yeah.
And of course, you could argue that so being connected to other human beings is equally an important thing, right?
Yeah.
So we've said this a lot, and I think generally believe this. So any sort of connection, in a way, if you want to make that into a content type of idea, like any sort of interaction with another person is creating some sort of a relationship with them. And even pointless stuff, so it's kind of nice. It's it's like when you ring your mum and you've not really got anything to say. You don't want to tell your mum that you've been to see Manowar because your mum's probably not into Manowar. So you just ask her where she's been. She's gone for a walk that morning, whatever. It's a pointless conversation, but it's nice to connect anyway. I suppose so there is a difference. Just a quick one. I think the Buddha. I think this is direct from the Buddha.
From the Buddha's mouth.
So he had admonished his monks to avoid talking about politics, crime, war, clothes, food and drink, vehicles, heroes, who they were crushing on, their relatives, or what happens after you die, and how the world was created. So basically no gossip is how that's described. Yeah. This is another Brad Warner. I don't think those are the exact words of the Buddha.
Crushing on.
But he makes the point that he was setting that bar really high because at that time he was talking to monks.
Yeah.
And so, of course, in everyday conversation, it's hard to not talk about that list of things with people, right? I mean, as in you'd have nothing to say. Now, having nothing to say, and I think we will talk about silence at some point as this episode goes on.
Yeah.
Having nothing to say is the ideal, ultimately, in this context.
Yeah.
But you do have to live your life, and you do have to have conversations with other people. And sometimes small talk isn't necessarily a bad thing, because small talk potentially can just be politeness. It can make people feel at ease.
But then I guess this is where it becomes so intermingled with all the other things. Because if you're small talking with someone because you just want to have a bit of connection with them and you genuinely care about them, but you've spoken to them so much recently that there's nothing really to say. But the motivation behind
I'm on a bus.
Yeah, but like the motivation behind it is one of, genuine care for someone. It becomes your I'm thinking of this just because you've just said I'm on a bus. I used to, when I got my first nursing job, I lived in London. I'd lived away from my parents for maybe 4 years at this point. But I got into a habit of ringing. I used to get a bus to work and a bus home from work, and I used to ring my mum on the bus home. So I'd do it maybe 3 or 4 times a week.
Your mum does like Manowar though, so you can talk.
But I do it 3 or 4 times. I work long days, 3 or 4 times a week, pretty much as a habit of doing it. But it became this nice little routine based in care and based in, a bit of me is like I'm just whiling away the time on the bus, but I'm doing it also just checking in, and it became kind of like basic. But that's what everyone else that you're. So when you listen, what you said was I totally got, and I agree with. When you're on public transport and you overhear somebody having a conversation that you think, oh God, but ultimately you have to be open to the fact some of those conversations don't fit into this at all. But sometimes it is just fucking bullshit. And you can hear both sides of the conversation. You know that both people are just filling the fucking air with nothing. But hearing somebody else's version of you talking to your mum on the bus is always going to sound like pointless bullshit to you. Yeah, no, that's true. It's true. And I guess that's the thing. You never know what someone else is thinking. You have to be... I mean, this is again, it intermingles with everything because, your thoughts about someone else's thoughts are still positive or negative only to you. So if I'm sitting here, you know, the fact that we're sitting here going, oh God, I overheard that, and they're just talking shit, you know, the only person that's negatively affecting is me, and then I'm going to put out negativity. So it's kind of...
Someone's been reading Marcus Aurelius.
There we go.
Yeah, I mean, that's pure stoicism, isn't it? Training yourself. So going back to what we were saying about what goes in comes out.
Yeah.
And so the sort of speech that you're around, having such an effect on your inner world.
Yeah.
Ultimately training yourself that doesn't have that effect.
Yeah.
Through years and years of meditation and contemplation.
I mean,
it is not something that most people are going to do, or that most of us are ever going to actually get, even though we're trying in a lot of ways. I doubt very much that I'll ever get there. I will always find other people to be very frustrating.
And it's hard, but I guess it's the practice of catching it, isn't it? I started this, I've mentioned it before, but it's you know, road rage is a classic. Well, not road rage, but, you know, or you could apply, you know, a CBT mind to the CBT comes from Stoicism, does it not? I think, you know, totally. It comes from there. So,
and Buddhism mixed together.
Well, that's it. So, you know, I have only just started reading that Marcus Aurelius book, but it is pure, as I understand it, it is the Buddhist kind of. It's definitely the Buddhism that we learn at the silent retreat, the kind of aversion and craving situation.
Of course, what's magic about it is the fact that
it's all the same.
It's the same, but they had no idea that each other were saying the same things at the same time, more or less same time.
Yeah, no, but it is. It's just craziness. It's this idea of, you know, I think there was a quote in the book. I'm going to absolutely ham it, but it's something to like to find joy in the things that are unenjoyable, and to find, you know, and to not give a toss about the things that are good. That's definitely what Marcus Aurelius said.
Much, yeah.
But it's just, I think it's when he was admiring what he liked in someone else. It was just the way that they could, you know, just not just have nothing, not feel nothing, but it's just like to feel good about, to be able to appreciate things that aren't so great, and to see the nonsense and other things. But anyway, coming back to the right thought and the right speech sort of element of this, I think the motivations behind speech and the motivations behind why you're talking, if you can be okay with that, then you're going to be fine. So I think when people do just have this kind of nothingy speech, I wonder what the intentions behind it are. Because, for example, if you're just having diddle-daddle conversation with someone because you can't be asked, you just want that time to be whiling away, it's better for everyone if you just said, I'm just walking away now, like in a way. And that's something that Thich Nhat Hanh argues for in his book. It's kind of this, because it moves on to compassionate listening eventually, and the only way to have appropriate speech without your motivations or your biases getting in the way, you have to really listen to what someone's actually saying and hear it without reacting to it. To say, for example, if someone was upset with you, or maybe someone's upset and you don't realize that they're upset with you, so you're speaking to them and you're asking why they are upset, maybe part of their speech back to you is going to be, you know, actually you did this thing, da 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 da. At that point you might stop compassionately listening. You might start, your thoughts might get carried away with you, or what have I done, or shit, I've pissed them off, or actually they've overreacted, how fucking dare they. It's about quieting that part of your brain and actually still listening to then be able to formulate your speech back. And one thing he argues is, if you can't, it's a bit like if you've got nothing nice to say, then don't say anything. He's arguing one step further, and again, you know, this is very perfect world and monkish, I would say, is about saying, like, I'm actually not in a position to hear this right now. Yeah, let's do this another time, because I want to give you my full attention. I want to give you my full best version of myself, sort of thing. Which, again, that then relies on the other person being able to hear that as well.
That's quite a therapeutic way of doing things
100%.
As well, isn't it? And a lot of that is about See, I've got mixed feelings about this. A lot of that is about looking after yourself in that context. So but there's a problem there. So the problem is that, let's just say, so someone's upset with you about something, and you've done something that they're upset about.
Yeah.
and they're trying to tell you why they're upset, but you don't feel like you're in a place to hear that at that time, putting yourself before them in that way and saying, do you know what, I can't listen to this right now, is quite selfish, I think. It's, it's like looking after yourself ahead of looking after somebody else.
Yeah. And
I don't know, but the alternative of that is to just put everybody else in front of you, which I think there's something to be said for this, actually.
Yeah.
And never think about your own state of mind, or never think about your own ability to kind of handle things. Because that would be quite a Hindu way of as a Hindu monk, what you do is you basically just say, I don't exist. I'm of no importance whatsoever.
Yeah.
Anything anybody wants to do to me or say to me is just, I'm getting, I deserve that or whatever.
But the other end of that is a really egotistical, and I say that because I think this is what most people would do. It becomes the argument is that you become reactionary and then you're not listening, and then you're not helpful, and then your speech isn't helpful, and then actually both of you end up being hurt because you might not actually be the great listener and person that they need at that point, because you might let your own feelings and your own even if it's not your own feelings, your own desire to give advice or your own, something about you gets in the way.
Totally. Well, this is listening skills 101 though, as well, isn't it? Because, and I don't know who said this. I feel like there's a famous quote that more or less says this, which I'm now going to butcher, and I also don't know who said it.
Yes.
But along the lines of, a conversation isn't really two people talking to each other. It's one person waiting for the other person to stop talking so that they can talk. And I think that there's definitely truth in that for us all. And sometimes that's about a slight anxiety. Like, I find social situations quite anxiety provoking. So therefore, in the past, I've definitely spent the whole time that someone's talking worrying about what I'm going to say next.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want this conversation to die. I don't want any awkwardness. So I'm desperately trying to think of what I'm going to say next. And in doing that, I'm ignoring. Well, not ignoring even, but I'm not concentrating on what they're saying.
Yeah, but it's something about you that's gotten in the way there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Which I suppose probably fits more into the right thinking mode of what we're talking about. But ultimately... But
it's so interlinking, because if you're not right thinking, then you're not listening, and then your speech will be either reactionary based on your own thoughts, or you won't have heard the other person, and you've got the wrong end of the stick.
And I think, there's absolute proof of this, without question, that none of us really understand what anybody else says in full.
That's true.
There's again, listening skills 101 is repeating back to somebody the thing that they just told you, and without fail, you will have always got it wrong. Like, you might have got some of the basic points right.
And that's so interesting, because I always thought that was really lazy psychology. But it isn't. It is in some respects. It is because it's so easy. But it's not because it's effective and there is a point to it. I always just thought it was just fucking lazy, get the other person to work out what's wrong with them. And you don't really have to be listening. But you do have to be listening to repeat something back. It's a bit like that compassion and pity problem that I have. In order to be pitiful, that comes from compassion. It's one begets the other.
Yeah.
So in order to just repeat something back to someone, you do have to have listened. And it's better to do that than to just assume what you've heard and answer it immediately. Another thing that Thich Nhat Hanh says is sometimes we also speak truth, or we all know someone that just goes, I just say it how it is.
Oh yeah.
I'll just say how it is. I was just telling the truth. Which is code for I'm an arsehole. Yeah. But he argues for, and Alain de Botton argues for this as well, there's got to be thoughtfulness behind your truth telling. Because if your truth telling is deliberately going to incite someone else or is done unkindly, like, you have to have this balance of everything at all times, which I think some people will argue isn't real. Some people will argue that you're lying, or that and this is where that blend of motivation and right thought and you've just got to nurture everything all at the same time. If we all went around and told everyone exactly what we thought of them all the time, it's not going to be a kind world. No. I think the idea is that, we have to sharpen all of these tools at the same time. working on our thoughts, working on our intentions, working on our motivations, and our speech at the same time. And there's just something to be said for compassionate listening, but also being compassionate with our words. Thinking before we speak just comes up all the time.
Well, I mean, two things really. One is that I think that you can be slightly more confident about that if you've put effort into the first two aspects of the Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
So if you've put effort into your right view and your right thought, then you can be... I think this has definitely happened for me in more recent times, is that I feel much more comfortable just saying what's on my mind than I have before.
Yeah.
Because I'm more confident in the fact that even if it's something that maybe someone's not going to like too much, although that doesn't really happen very much if I'm honest, but even if it's something maybe that's a bit challenging or comes from a different perspective. I mean, this is definitely true politically. Like, I have no problem with saying whatever's on my mind from a political perspective because I know that I've thought about it loads.
Yeah.
And I know I might not be right, but I'll at least have something to back it up. Whereas I would argue, just using myself as an example, in the past, I haven't had any of that. I would, if I said anything remotely political or whatever, I would not have done any of I would not know anything about it, potentially. I would just be saying whatever I thought was the right thing to say to make me look at my very best.
And I think it's about being well-intended, isn't it? Like, that your motivation behind that is well-intended and it's fine. I find this sometimes. I find something I've noticed that has changed is this: when something comes off not how I intended it, there are things I used to feel bad about that I would then message someone and be like, oh my God, sorry, I didn't realise this happened, da-da-da-da-da. Which now I'm like, I'm willing to let that go. And if that other person thinks ill of me, that's fine, because I know that I didn't mean for that to be the case. And it may, and I have no idea what that person's thinking. They might not have even noticed it. Whereas old anxious Siobhan would have been like, oh my God, this, and this. And that person would still then be like, oh God, don't worry about it. I didn't even notice. Even if they're being nice or not, who knows? It's just, there is just something about this. If you're doing all these bits and pieces at a time, I'm not trying to say that you act like an arsehole and go, oh, well, I didn't mean to, so it's fine. It's
or
just
I'd
something...
really thought about that.
Yeah, I'd
really squared that with myself, so I can say what I want.
But there is something about, like, I really like this element of, again, the Christmas Humphreys idea of silence being the sacred thing, and really just being sure of what you want to say and being sure of your intentions in that respect. I just think is really...
Do you think that that's changed for you a little bit since the silent retreat? So I bring that up partly because I think it changed. There's something about being silent for an amount of time that possibly naturally changes your mindset. Something that I really like about all of these definitions of right speech is that it's more or less saying silence is good. If you're going to break the silence, then it needs to be for a worthwhile reason. And I think that's a completely... we've sort of touched on this already, but it's a completely different way to how we're brought up.
Yeah.
In our society, like, just filling the air with words is very important.
Yeah.
Not that anyone would necessarily view it that way. And I think that going on the silent retreat changed my attitude towards that. I mean, partly it's just from being more comfortable in silence, which is something I've never had before. But also it's just... it changes the emphasis from, oh my God, I found myself in a social situation, I need to find some words to say out loud, to, oh, I found myself in a social situation.
Yeah.
Have I got anything worthwhile to say to this other person?
I think it speaks to our anxieties, because you've got that social anxiety, and I've definitely got one of, I've pissed everyone off. Like, I'm doing the wrong thing.
I think I have that too.
No, I'm not saying you don't, but I'm just saying, like, your outcome has been one of, you're now more comfortable in that social silence. And mine's definitely this, thinking that everyone's thinking the worst of you because of something you've decided was wrong. And I got faced with that loads. You had to navigate going in and out of dining halls, 80 of you, or being in a room with someone, or using the showers, or using the bathrooms in complete silence. And we come from a British culture of, oh no, you first, oh you go there. All of a sudden you had to, I'm such a, for me, this is where I feel like I'm really British, like, I know who queued up in what order, so I know exactly who should be going in what order because I'm just weird and I've just noticed it. So I kind of like this inherent sense of just, which is just so stupid because it means nothing.
The justness of queuing.
Yeah. But it's just like, it's really sad. I can just, if 20 people queued up, I'd know exactly what order they got there in, and if they'd gone in the wrong order. Very sad. But the silent retreat, it makes you assume that everyone's well-intended, which I think is something about Buddhism. It's like, actually, no one wants to be an arsehole. Everyone's made of the same stuff. We all just want to get through everything happily. I truly believe everyone deep down does want that, and that people who are difficult wouldn't want to be difficult. I say this about my manager at work all the time, and I struggle with him, but he would not want to be thought of the way that people think of him. No one would. No one would. And it's not right that we have these thoughts, but I don't believe that anyone who has those thoughts made about them would want to be like that.
Well, you're the victim of yourself, aren't you?
Yeah.
When we were coming, I think you sort of vaguely referred to this. You didn't go into it though. When we were on the plane yesterday, there was a family in front of us.
I'm going to completely ruin myself now.
It was no. I mean, I don't really bring this up as gossip. I actually really, in hindsight, it took me a while. I had to get off the plane first, but I felt rather sorry for them because it was a couple, man and wife or whatever, and they had 3 kids, one of whom was very young. They were all very young. They'd given all 3 of these kids, including the one that couldn't even talk, was like tiny, an iPad each. So they'd just obviously told them, go on the plane and just watch something on the iPad. They didn't have headphones or anything. So all 3 of them were just playing their iPads at the same time. So it made a complete cacophony. Obviously, their kids.
Like schizophrenia. It was horrible.
And then the wife started... Sorry, that's very old-fashioned, but fuck it. The wife started looking on her phone as well, so I think she was doing something, TikToking or something, so hers started making a noise as well. We were sat directly behind them. So again, like we used the example on the train, I heard every single word. I was literally a foot away from them both. I heard every word that they said to each other, and they were just bickering. They were being... You said to me at one point, they're just being awful. They're being
horrible to each other.
And of course, so from my perspective there, I'm sitting on a plane that I've got to sit on for 2.5 hours with a lot of turbulence, which upped my stress levels more. And I had to listen to these kids playing their iPads, not being parented at all, just making a racket, climbing over each other, doing all of this shit.
And this couple just hate
And the couple just arguing with each other. Yeah. What conversation they did have, again, just because I could hear it, was completely banal. You got to assume they've been together for a while because they've got 3 kids, one of whom's probably about 8 or whatever. And it's just like, what you're talking about, like bullshit, utter nonsense.
Yeah.
Not that it's for me to judge, but I was stuck there, so I didn't have much of a choice. But ultimately, you could, and they were both obviously very stressed, and they're on a plane, and they've got kids, and they're probably coming home from their holiday, and there's lots of reasons to be stressed. But one of the big reasons to be really stressed is that that's what their life sounds like.
Yeah.
Those 3 iPads going on at all time, whilst the wife also looks on her TikTok, and probably the husband does too, is the sound of their life at all times. Now, they don't... they think, in a lot of ways, their attitude is still shit, right? Their attitude has still been, let's fuck everybody else on the plane.
Oh, 100%.
I don't care what their journey's like. I'm just going to let my kids make as much noise as they want. And so you can be annoyed about that. But the thing is that there's this circular thing there as well. One of the reasons why they've given those kids iPads is because the kids are a nightmare. One of the reasons why the kids are a nightmare is because they've been given fucking iPads. And like... So they exist in this awful reality.
Yeah.
And they don't even know that it's an awful reality. They probably think, oh, yeah, they probably think they're better than everyone else. Oh, fuck everyone else on the plane.
Or they think the kids have ADHD.
Or they think their kids are amazing or whatever.
Yeah.
But the point is that what they don't realise, and I think this goes back 2 steps in the Eightfold Path thing, is that they're right. Their view is wrong. They've set up this life. It's not wrong. Wrong isn't the right turn of phrase at all.
Talking about somebody else's Buddhist life. I mean, Buddhist goes.
Yeah, so I'm using it in a Buddhist term. Yeah. They've created something which is just like making this low level noise at all times.
Yeah.
They're probably not as sensitive as I am to those things, I'm sure. But still, there's a stress there that they don't even know is the stress that's just continuously going. And, of course, the stress leads to certain behaviour. The behaviour leads to more stress and go on and on and on. Yeah. And the end point of that is the speech of what they're saying to each other. This nonsensical
bullshit
little argument that they're having on a plane in front of everybody. And again, you can look at it in two different ways. You can be annoyed with them and think, they don't care about anybody else, and that's true. But it doesn't matter that it's true. Yeah. They're still having a much worse time.
Yeah.
Like on that plane for those 2 hours. I can't speak of their life in general. I'm sure they have a lovely life. I'm sure it's all fine. It's none of my fucking business. But for those 2 hours, they were having a worse time than I was having.
Yeah.
And fair enough, you could say, well, I didn't have those kids.
Yeah.
I don't need to, But ultimately, I've completely lost my trail of thought. But
it's all very interlinked. Thich Nhat Hanh does the Eightfold Path in a different order, a bit for this reason. He has right speech down at number 7, I think, or definitely not at number 3. And at number 3, he has right mindfulness, which is normally at number 7 in everything else, because it's the kind of...
We'll get there. Practical. Spoiler alert.
Exactly.
Spoiler alert.
It's the very practical thing that people, it gets extrapolated out of the Eightfold Path and put on its own, but we're trying to describe why it's brought back in. But Thich Nhat Hanh brings it in at number 3, pre-speech. I think it's the one before speech, because what he's trying to say... Part of the mindfulness is about that control, that stopping, that respecting the silence, that thinking before you speak sort of thing, and anticipating all of what is coming up for you as to why you're about to say what you're about to say. And that relates to the silent retreat meditation that we did, which is, the kind of sitting there and realizing what's really happening on a sensation level, pre everything that comes up, sensations lead to your reactions, lead to your thoughts, lead to the speech. So that's I think why he inputs the mindfulness at that sort of point. And I think that is another reason why things start to change. You were saying about what changed since the silent retreat. It's not just the silence, but it is that intense meditation, that kind of, you practice the sitting in silence, the observing of things, and slowing your immediate reaction down, and everything. Again, it all feeds each other in this like 8-spoke wheel of interconnected stuff.
Yeah.
But I quite like that he places mindfulness so much earlier in the thing. Anyway, we'll get to it because spoiler, it's coming up. But I do think it's worth bringing up that he does put it before speech for this, pretty much for this sort of reason, practicing the not thinking, but the pausing and the observing before the action or the speech or the thinking.
I think, there's something within that about getting to know yourself as well, which, of course, being in silence for a long period of time allows you to do that. But also through meditation, I think you get to know yourself more.
Yeah.
And I suppose there is a therapeutic aspect to it. I wanted to bring up therapy with a sort of a capital T.
Mm-hmm.
Because I happened to read something in a completely different place that made me I thought it had a sort of knock-on effect to this right speech discussion. And this is from Werner Herzog, the German director whose autobiography I read, and he says, "I'd rather die than go to an analyst, because it's my view that something fundamentally wrong happens there. If you harshly light every last corner, the house will be uninhabitable. It's like that with your soul. If you light it up, shadows and darkness and all, people will become uninhabitable." And obviously we come from quite therapeutic backgrounds as psychiatric nurses and ex-psychiatric nurses. And I've obviously been very aware of the kind of the anti-psychiatry movement and anti-psychology movement. But for some reason, reading that just made me really think about, or maybe ask a question: is therapy good? Is offloading, keeping in mind this is purely speech, therapy is 100% speech, or psychoanalytic is anyway. I'm sure there are types of therapies where you scream into a pillow and things, but even that's a type of speech. Does it improve? And this is too big of a question. I'm really just posing the question, and maybe if you have any thoughts about it, that would be wonderful. How much therapy helps our mental health? Obviously, therapy of the culture that we live in at the moment, and how much. The thing that I took from that Werner Herzog thing was that does talking about something make it more? If talking about something makes it more real, like we've said, and I think is relatively uncontroversial of a thing to say, is talking about all of your problems all the time making them worse? Are you lighting the house too much?
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that as a quote because I think what it highlights is that we're all made of the same stuff and we've all got darkness. And with that in mind, we should all be a lot more compassionate to each other because everyone's an arsehole. Because if you're an arsehole, then I'm an arsehole and everyone else is an arsehole at some point. So I think it's good for reminding us that we all have that. And with that in mind, paying attention to it is there, if everyone's got it, can we all kind of level out and know we're all a bit arseholey and there's nothing to really do there? I don't know. That's just a more rhetorical question.
Oh no, that's quite interesting because it suggests. I mean, that's about something else in a way, but in the context of critiquing therapy, I think that's a very good critique because, and this is true of all psychology, psychiatry, everything to do, self-help, everything about this is that we know what the level of good is, what right is, where you're supposed to be. Because nobody knows what anybody else's mental health is like. So it's impossible. If, I've said this a lot about loads of different things. If you don't know what something isn't, it can't be a thing. Yeah. So when you say, I'm just picking this out at random. If you say I'm depressed, you kind of need an idea of what not depressed is. And of course, we all understand that in completely different terms. In fact, it's a completely obscure existential concept.
A huge spectrum of
by
things.
the way, that I'm certainly not saying that people aren't depressed. But when we use that sort of language or when we talk about that sort of thing, what does it actually mean?
100%. And I think we've gotten into this world of overdiagnosis. People will... I hate hearing something is underdiagnosed. It makes me so fucking livid because I don't feel anti-psychiatry, anti-psychology. I don't feel anything anti, but I do think I might be anti-diagnosis, which is stupid because it's the way that we're built, the way that our medical model is built at the minute. You have to have a diagnosis to get treatment. I hate that. I think that symptoms should be treated and not a diagnosis. So I think people's reliance on a diagnosis has led to something else. It's led to I should get what I deserve. I have an excuse or a reason for something that I don't need to deal with in any other way other than through whatever the treatment is for this issue. And this is where... It
goes beyond treatment, though, as well, doesn't it? Because this is where I have a similar beef with kind of support groups where you get a load of people that all have the same mental health diagnosis and you say, just go into a room together and have a chat. You'll all feel better at the end of it.
That's how conspiracy theory ends.
I've experienced a lot of those and experienced a lot of people that have actively gone to those things and you never feel better at the end of it. You always feel worse. And if anything... you always find new bad things in your own world.
And it's hard because I don't want to diminish, the idea of feeling not alone because I get that.
Again, we're not in any way saying that people who are diagnosed with a mental health problem don't have anything wrong with them by any means. That's I didn't know you were going to come in quite so hard.
No, I don't know. There's just something here that I think going in hard helps then pick out the subtleties maybe. But I do think there's something to be said for, when you clinically have a tumour that needs diagnosing in order to be removed. Actually, just to make that point...
No, that was interesting because I was going to say you can't remove depression or you can't remove schizophrenia.
True. And you have to learn to live with it, which is more to the point of you have to learn to live with it. It didn't happen to you. So actually, yeah, no, that is a good point. But more with a tumour, the diagnosis sometimes happens afterwards. The important thing is to manage the thing. And that has to be done by someone other than you. That's the thing. So I had this issue with a friend of mine who was going through a really hard time and desperately wanted a diagnosis for it, and was convinced it was bipolar, so started going to bipolar support groups and was getting help understanding her symptoms in regards to bipolar, but was still gasping for the diagnosis. And at that point it made me realise you don't need if what you're getting already, assuming it was bipolar, is helping you, you know, you've learned things to help you stay in the middle window and not be manic and not be depressed. You've found people who have similar stories to you and you're getting some good from that. What does the diagnosis matter when you're doing the things that are helping you?
And I think in that case also, it always felt to me like the diagnosis didn't actually matter.
No.
That person just wanted one for some obscure reason. Like the diagnosis wasn't going to make any difference.
No.
But also, I don't think that getting the diagnosis made everything all right.
No.
Or made everything clearer, or made any difference at all. It was just that there was something about getting a diagnosis that suddenly, for no reason whatsoever, was important.
Which I think is not uncommon. It's huge. So again, when I hear that things are underdiagnosed, I'm just like, so much is diagnosed that I think could just be managed. Or what does the diagnosis... Unless... Don't get me wrong. Unless that diagnosis means you're going to get a medication that you could not survive without. You know, I deal with people with chronic schizophrenia that if they did not have the antipsychotics they're on, they would be absolutely fucked and their life would be unlivable. It just is what it is. But there's some times where I'm just, especially depression, especially low level depression, we rely on that being diagnosed and we rely on a treatment rather than, and then just to take this back to speech, there is some need for, I do think there's a need for therapy at this point to some level, but it has to be one where the point is to move on and to move forward. And this is where like measured speech and like spending some time on the bits that need to happen, because I think this is where the lighting of the room happens, and this is where maybe psychoanalysis and psychotherapy comes in. I think therapy for a particular reason is useful, with
an endpoint. So we're going to do 6 weeks, or whatever. This amount of time, and this is your problem, and we're going to make this problem better.
But also, there's homework that isn't just this talking. There's, you know, stuff for you to do. This is your life, your mental health, your brain. I'm not here to fix you. I get that. But the joke in therapies is, you know, tell me about your childhood. It just goes so far back that if you start going everywhere, you put attention on things that... And this is my slight problem with Alan de Botton's obsession with psychoanalysis, because he's like, everyone should do it. Everyone's fucked. And he's like, well, if everyone's fucked, and again, can we lower that bar back to, is fucked actually normal? What? It's so normal for everyone to have a bit of something in their childhood or in their life that's made them the way that they are. But it hasn't made them fucked up. It hasn't made them irreversibly a mess. It's just made you who you are. We are all complicated, horrible things that have darkness, that have arsehole sides. And they all have reasons, but it doesn't necessarily, unless that's actually a thing you want to change, what's the point in lighting it up and then lighting it up for the whole world to see? I don't know. I think it's interesting that Alan de Botton says that everyone should have therapy, but he also says that most therapists are terrible and you shouldn't go to them. And I don't know whether he's being smart there or whether it's a little darkness in his sort of understanding. It's quite interesting because those are two of his main messages, and of course, therefore, it's completely unworkable. I just think there has to be why do you want to know? Like that's my thing. Like he's done it from a, isn't everything so fascinating? You can work on yourself if you know everything about yourself. Yeah, and I'm literally a philosopher who's thought about this stuff exactly that most people don't think about. Exactly, yeah. But that's the thing. Most people don't want to think about, and don't want to think about. So a diagnosis, an emphasis on therapy, an emphasis on there being a reason you are the way you are is very helpful if most people don't really want to go there with either accepting they are who they are or doing anything to work on it. This is why I like mindfulness, because it's a blanket therapy. It's pre-therapy. It's pre-thinking about anything. Why? It's just stopping reacting.
As Kurt Vonnegut said, there is no why.
Aww.
So there you go. You see, we can always find a Vonnegut quote for you.
We can always find a Vonnegut.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't actually know that was going to be your opinion. So, but sorry. I do think no, it's great. I sort of brought it up more. Like I said, I didn't know that there would really be an answer, but I suppose when it's worth saying, we should call it a day there, really. But it's worth saying that obviously with the Eightfold Path, and this is something that I don't think we talk about that much. But this is true of all of the stuff that we talk about, all of the self-help type stuff, all of the spirituality type stuff, is that ultimately mental health is what it's all about. And we don't often address actually mental health, and we are both have quite a lot of experience in mental health, so on both ends. And so I think that as the Eightfold Path unravels, it may become a bigger player in the narrative. Mm-hmm. If not, then we've just had a little conversation there, which wasn't really about right speech, but that's fine.
I think most of this episode has not actually ended up being about right speech, which is ironic. Because we're meant to be thinking before we speak and making it meaningful. Well, and we've just shat out 2 hours of non-right speech.
That is the wonderful nature of reality. And you, the listener, have been there to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So we will call it a day there. Yeah. We put this podcast out every 2 weeks. We don't tell anybody about it on the social medias. So if you would like to tell anybody about it, please feel free to do so with your mouth. Using right speech, of course.
Of course.
And you can contact us. Again, please do use right speech if you're going to send me an email. shamcityroasters@gmail.com. I will, of course, reply with perfect speech. I mean, you know.
You've never seen speech like it.
Never seen speech like it. And we will see you in 2 Thursdays' time. Have a lovely time.
Yeah, I hope you do.
And we'll, Goodbye.
Goodbye for another 2 weeks. Ciao.